You are not tired. You are uninspired by the life you're living. I had to reread it. And then sit with it. And then question everything. Because at that time, I was tired. Constantly. Not from work. Not from a lack of sleep. But from dragging myself through routines that no longer felt meaningful. From conversations that sounded the same. From days that blurred together. And then I realized, I wasn't living a hard life. I was living a life too small for who I was becoming. That quote didn't just call me out. It cracked something open. I started asking myself questions I'd been too afraid to face. What parts of my life are just habits I never questioned? Who would I be if I stopped doing what was expected? And started doing what mattered? How much of my exhaustion comes from performing instead of being? It's strange how one sentence can become a mirror. That forgotten quote made me realize that I was outsourcing my fulfillment to routines. I was mistaking motion for meaning. And worse, I was building a life I didn't even want. Simply because I didn't know what else to build. That's when I began writing down questions instead of answers. Because answers are fixed. But questions keep unfolding. Here's what I started with. What am I still doing just because I once decided it was a good idea? Sometimes, the most dangerous commitments aren't the ones forced on us. They're the ones we silently agreed to years ago, and never reevaluated. What do I truly need right now, and what am I doing to avoid giving it to myself? We're often not lazy. We're self-abandoning. And busyness can be a brilliant way to hide from the work of healing. When was the last time I felt alive, not just functional? We normalize too much. We get used to low energy, shallow joy, and muted dreams. But life isn't meant to be endured. It's meant to be felt. The more I reflected, the more that forgotten quote kept deepening. It wasn't just about burnout. It was about aliveness. About choosing a life that doesn't just look good, but feels right. So I started changing small things. I stopped saying I'm just tired. Instead, I asked myself, what part of me is hungry right now? And for what? I stopped planning every hour. And started leaving space to listen, to myself, to the moment, to life. I stopped glorifying productivity. And started honoring presence. Because here's what I learned, we are not machines. We don't run on efficiency alone. We run on meaning. On connection. On purpose. And when life loses those things, it doesn't matter how much we sleep, we'll still feel exhausted. Another quote I found not long after said, the soul gets tired before the body ever does. That one hit even harder. Because I realized I was trying to rest my way out of spiritual depletion. But rest doesn't restore a soul that's been silenced. Only truth does that. Only alignment does that. And so I asked myself, where am I being dishonest with my own desires? That question shifted everything. Because I was always quick to spot my stress. But I rarely stopped to ask, what dream have I abandoned to stay comfortable? What part of myself have I edited to be more acceptable? What truth am I swallowing just to keep peace with people who aren't even listening? It's uncomfortable to ask those things. But it's more uncomfortable to live your whole life asleep. To die in a version of yourself you never even got to know. That quote, simple as it was, broke the spell of numbness. It reminded me that inspiration isn't a luxury. It's fuel. And when you deny yourself what lights you up, life will dim on its own. Here's what else I learned on the journey that quote sparked. You don't need to have everything figured out. But you do need to stop pretending that nothing's wrong. You don't need to burn your whole life down. But you do need to start lighting a fire inside yourself again. You don't need to find some grand, perfect purpose. But you do need to find what makes you feel real. Because burnout isn't always about overwork. Sometimes it's the body saying, this version of life is no longer enough for who you truly are. We think of burnout as exhaustion. But more often, it's erosion. The slow wearing down of our joy. The quiet collapse of curiosity. The steady dimming of our creative spark. And the only antidote isn't just rest. It's reconnection. To your own voice. To your forgotten dreams. To the version of yourself that existed before the world told you who to be. Another quote I rediscovered said, your soul remembers the life you promised to live. That shook me. Because deep down, I knew I was off course. Not in a dramatic way. But in subtle, silent ways that made each day feel like a performance. And I was so busy trying to prove I was okay, that I forgot to ask if I actually was. Sometimes, the most powerful transformation doesn't start with a plan. It starts with a pause. With a quote. With a moment that feels like truth whispering, you were meant for more. Not more stuff. Not more success. But more life. More presence. More alignment. More moments that make your heart say, yes. This is me. So now, whenever I feel disconnected, I go back to that quote. The one I almost skipped over. You are not tired. You are uninspired by the life you're living. It doesn't scold me. It reminds me that I don't need to settle. That I can still pivot. That there's always something I can return to, my own aliveness. And from that place, I write new pages. Not for anyone else. Not to impress or perform. But to remember who I am. And who I'm still becoming.